Hi, everyone. Welcome to our re-recording of the webinar we held on Monday called Supporting Teachers, Tools and Information to Better Understand Body Image Issues and Eating Disorders in Youth. My name is Ari Maharaj. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Outreach and Education Coordinator at the National Eating Disorder Information Center. And I'm joined here by my colleague, Josée.
Hi, I'm Josée Lavigne. I work at ANEB, Québec, Anorexia and Bulimia, Québec, and I'm part of the education and prevention component at ANEB.
We're really excited to get to chat with all of you today and through this recording about this issue. And note that this is part one, a webinar that we're doing in spring, and there will be more information on how to access part two in October at the end of the webinar. Here are our goals for today. We're hopefully going to learn about the impact of COVID-19 on youth body image and disordered eating. And we'll engage in a discussion, and you'll hear about that discussion in this recording, about the challenges of instructing during the past year.
You'll also learn about a free evidence-informed curriculum done by one of our partners for students in grades 4 to 8.
And you'll get to hear about strategies to be a positive role model in your classroom.
So before we start, we'd like to get into the question of what is body image and what is self-esteem. So body image is really the mental picture you have of your body, what it looks like, what you believe about it, and how you feel about your body. Self-esteem is the real opinion you have of yourself, how you value and respect yourself as a person. This is as much emotionally, physically, and spiritually, sorry. And they are linked together. So self-esteem and body image, they influence each other. And this is very important. This is something that we see with our clientele, how we need to approach these two topics. And unfortunately, what we see is a lot of negative body image and a low self-esteem in our population. So I went ahead and showed you two links that you can go to if you're interested in those two topics.
Like Josée mentioned, here's an example of how self-esteem and body image are related to eating disorders, which is why some of you might be watching this webinar. This is a model called the tripartite influence model of body image and eating disturbance, and you can see the citations there at the bottom of the screen. We're going to talk about this throughout the webinar, but all of you as teachers, as educators, as people who support youth are part of that person's sociocultural influence. Your parents or the peers or the media that they see, you have influence sometimes over those things. And what can sometimes happen with our young people, and quite frankly, everyone, I think, is sometimes we can engage in this really negative downward social comparison and often internalize those media ideals, really believe them to be true and have them have an impact on our body image and how we feel about ourselves. And that leads to that body dissatisfaction that can sometimes put people at risk for an eating disorder. When we talk about the continuum of eating and weight concerns, you'll see that diagnosed eating disorder on the very, very right of the graphic. And those are the clinical issues, the things that Josée and I see and NEDIC and ANEB see on an everyday basis, the cases that you've heard reported over and over again during the COVID-19 pandemic period in our hospitals. And those are really, really severe. And I think what we are hoping throughout this webinar and this workshop that we do with you is that we're going to better be able to spot those disordered eating flags. And that's that box in the middle there. When someone is restricting their food intake, when they're preoccupied maybe with food weight or shape and their thoughts and feelings around that. When they're engaging in fasting for non-religious or spiritual purposes. That perfectionism that can maybe make someone a really good student, but when it's applied to their body, can really run things amok. And some things that we often feel are more aligned with around the eating disorder diagnosis, things like binge eating, the use of laxatives or other substances, and excessive exercise as a means of coping with negative emotion and exercising through pain. So this isn't regular physical activity or joyful movement or activity for sport, but it's really going past the point that it influences your thoughts and perceptions about yourself. Fundamentally, we would like people to be on the very left there, in a place of body acceptance, a place of body trust, and a flexibility around food. Feel like they can trust themselves and trust their experiences to navigate life however they want to navigate it.
So you might be interested in knowing what is an eating disorder. When we'll talk about it, you'll see how complex it is. It's not one thing in particular. It's a combination of different factors. We call them pre-existing factors. They can be biological, so your genetics. So for example, if in your family there are mental illnesses, especially anxiety or depression, you could be more at risk of developing an eating disorder. Also, psychologically, so your own personality. Ari had mentioned perfectionism. Well, that could be something in the individual that makes him or her more prone to have an eating disorder. Also, how you regulate emotions. If you are an emotional person, how you cope with all that, and also the environment in which you are living. So it could be, for example, in your own family. What are the values that are placed, for example, on performance or on the body itself? Also school, and at large, this our society. So the social ideals that are presented to us, all of these will impact whether or not someone can develop an eating disorder. And it's good to note that someone could have all of these factors in place, but perhaps they will not develop an eating disorder because the conditions in which they live make them not so susceptible to have an eating disorder. So if you're well supported, for example, if you have tools to manage, for example, your anxiety, this will help you. We've also seen, and we'll talk about it later, but how the pandemic has just increased eating disorders, and even people who had recovered, how the anxiety that came and the isolation that came with the pandemic was just too much for some individuals. So they went back to their eating disorders. So as you see, it's very complex.
Josée nicely talked about what causes an eating disorder, and I'm going to talk about what perpetuates it. So what can keep people stuck in it once they're in it? And you'll see here on this slide, some of the things listed in the darker colors are what NEDIC and ANEB have noticed more during the COVID-19 period. And the list here isn't an exhaustive list, but showcases some common examples of what can drive eating disorder behavior. One thing that I'll point out is you'll notice that social media in and of itself isn't explicitly on here, because it's more so about the way in which potentially social media is used and how that impacts that young person. So if social media is used as a tool for negative social reinforcement, like you're posting images and you're feeling validated when your body looks one way, but not so validated when your body looks another way, or what you're seeing then impacts your self-concept, the way you see yourself, or whether it's used as a means to preserve not so great relationships. Remember that on the flip side, social media can also be used as a way to preserve great relationships and has been a way to connect over the course of this pandemic period. And so it's more so when you see that mentioned as a cause, it's the way that it can be used to perpetuate or keep people stuck in it. And when we have young people talking to us about their social media use, making sure to be non-judgmental and inquire really curiously about why that might be. And we'll give you some conversation tips for that a bit later. Josée, is there anything here that you've noticed in your work with ANEB that's come up more for you?
In terms of it'd be more for I think everything is well stated here. The isolation, of course, as you this is something that we've noticed on our calls, for example, and yeah, and anxiety that comes with the pandemic, just not knowing necessarily what's going to happen. If if you could, if someone who was already anxious, the idea of a virus that could kill you or make you sick, it can be a little bit overwhelming, and the impact we can understand is pretty heavy. Mm.
Yeah, on José's point, these are some of the things that NEDIC and ANEB on our English-speaking helpline and in Quebec and on the French-speaking helpline, things that we've kind of noticed across the country, things that we've heard. So a lack of access to treatment, people saying things like, I'm currently getting outpatient treatment, but my groups have been canceled for the time being, and I really rely on their support and I'm not sure what to do. Or a worsening of symptoms, people who have been in recovery from anorexia and bulimia and binge eating disorder and other things for years now. But ever since this whole isolation thing started, my symptoms would come back and worsened almost immediately. A feeling out of control, people saying things like, I'm struggling during quarantine not to overeat out of stress and boredom, and it's making my eating disorder spiral. And that increased need for support. Like José mentioned, that isolation, sometimes not being taken into account. Someone said, my doctor said that I'd be safer at home, safer from COVID maybe, but not safer from myself. Um, Anything you want to add here, José?
Sure. I would simply add that we have a lot of calls coming from loved ones, because the pandemic makes it that we're more isolated. The people that do surround our environment, if you're in a family, for example, or if you're friends living together, that person who can have an eating disorder, the people around them can feel a little bit out of, they need a little bit of support, and especially the fact that as we all know, our health services are so in demand because of the pandemic, that it becomes even more great that are the people who surround us, support us. And so I would just add that our calls are mostly for people, yes, who are suffering, but a lot of calls also from loved ones, friends who are concerned and who don't quite know how to best approach someone who has an eating disorder.
When youth have chatted in or called in to us, they've usually brought up topics like this. Having limited activities at home and sometimes that leading to more screen time. NEDIC and ANEB both partner with Dove in different ways, and they've mentioned that by the age of 17, 80% of Canadian girls have used a photo editing app, and they've released a resource pack that we've linked there called the Selfie Talk as ways that you can potentially have that conversation with people in your life. Um, like José has mentioned with family, when family isn't going well and you can feel stuck at home and you're stuck with those troubled family relationships, it can really interfere with someone's eating or someone's body image and the way in which they're managing their mental health. Sometimes their usual coping mechanisms don't apply or aren't working because we're in a global pandemic for many of these people for the very first time. And so it can be hard to access that support with isolation or with restrictions on gatherings. And we've heard a lot, like José has mentioned, from friends and other people who are kind of like, well, everyone's struggling, so I don't really want to burden, or like everyone's tiptoeing more around the topic. And it's a lot harder and maybe a lot less natural for people to bring things up when we can't really see people in person. And José and I, well, in Quebec and Ontario, and we've seen stats from across the country really indicating an increase in hospitalizations, either to emergency rooms for eating disorders, but also for other mental health issues that are absolutely related, like depression up 15% in January, February 2021 versus 2020. or people as young as 10 really struggling with their relationship so much that they're going to the hospital. Um, and so there's many, many citations that we have for these statistics. And I think you all have maybe seen that on the news a fair amount. On the helpline statistics wise, I'll speak for NEDIC and Josée to speak for ANEB, but I think they're pretty similar. Since March 2020, our telephone helpline and chat services have seen an increase of 67%. And among youth ages 11 to 19, that's where we've seen our biggest spike in demand, a year-over-year increase of 104%, specifically on chat, which is around where 2/3 of folks are feeling comfortable to contact us in an anonymous and confidential way. What's it been like for ANEB?
Well, same for us, and even an increase in 131% of all our services, meaning like you, the phone line, the also the intervention in by chat or by texting, and also our support groups. So we've increased our hours, we've added groups. The advantage, if we can say, of the pandemic made us realize how important it is to reach to people who are outside of big cities. So we will keep a good portion of our services, for example, the support groups, still online for those people. It's even more evident for us because of the pandemic how it's important to reach out to those people. And just to give you an idea of the busiest month, and this is always some of it we can predict. We predicted that January and February would be very important months for us, and they were. And also the beginning of school year, so September, October, an increase. And sometimes it's hard to say, like with the for example, right now we thought that with the better conditions in terms of the health conditions here in Quebec, because we've been doing quite well, we thought that there would be a decrease, but there's actually more services in on the helpline. We think it might be another category of people who are calling us during the school year, maybe a younger population, and now adults, because some restrictions that are a little bit less um, controlled might bring on some anxiety for some people.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. When we did this live, we got to hear from all of the live participants what they've heard on how the pandemic has impacted experiences for their students or their youth around food, weight, and body. We had a really, Josée, I think, a really diverse audience. We had folks from, I feel like, all over the country,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
especially a lot of small towns, right?
yeah. Castleman, Ontario, for example.
Yeah,
Um,
places, yeah, Cochrane, Alberta,
mhm, mhm,
Vancouver Island in British Columbia, folks from
mhm,
all over. So I'll
mhm.
read out some of the things that were shared there without mentioning names and such. And feel free to add on, Josée, anything that you're remembering from that conversation that we want to share with this recorded audience. And so there was a teacher who noted, several students I teach are dealing with eating disorders, and many kids seem to be restricting specifically, so not really engaging in food intake as much. Someone else says, my students mention loneliness, a lack of motivation, low energy, and boredom. And I know that's something we've heard really frequently. I'm feeling kind of stuck and I'm not really being as engaged, like the light out of their eyes, those sorts of things. On NEDIC service, binge eating has been the biggest topic increase on the chat service. And there were a couple of folks who had kind of said that they're seeing a lot of restrict and binge cycle, and we're questioning the amount of time spent on social media, Josée. And I feel like you've
Mhm.
seen that too with screen time, the amount of
Yes.
folks maybe being on it.
Yeah, we have, especially the younger population, but for everyone in general, because of the isolation, how else will you be able to connect to with people? So yes, and if you're already vulnerable, seeing images even more during the day will just increase your own vision of what you should look like and what your body should look like, or your self-esteem in comparison to others. Another teacher at the end of the webinar also commented on how, so she is a dance teacher, and she commented how usually it's fairly common to have students who have eating disorders in her program. And we can understand why. I mean, they are more at risk. There are individuals who are more at risk. So young people, for example, is one of them, but also people who, young students who are in a program, dance or sports related, can be even more at risk. And she was saying how this year in particular, it was even more, she saw even more cases of students with eating disorders. And how do you approach when in dancing, for example, it's like an underlying, not many people will openly talk about it because it's kind of encouraged to have a particular type of body. And if we think of classical ballet, for example, things are changing, but obviously there's still a lot of work to do. So she thought it was very challenging for her own experience and for students especially.
Mhm. Some of our friends in BC noticed just like a raw increase in the amount of times they maybe had to to bring things up with students, or eventually sometimes even have to support like hospitalization and things like that. And then some other folks mentioned just like the way in which the pandemic has impacted the structure of everyone's eating. And I don't know about any of you watching, but like many of us have had to work from home, and I count in that boat. And I think I eat really differently when I'm at home versus when I'm in the office, and the way in which the structure is. And they were
Mhm.
mentioning how a lot of students have found like they were snacking more rather than eating really big meals, but that was causing them lots of discomfort because it was like they were almost always eating, and their bodies are probably changing, and they don't have their friends around to really navigate that either. And so just a real combination of things that I
Mhm.
expect we'll see continue in different ways when we go back to whatever it is in the fall, and we're excited to chat with you then.
Mhm. So we'd like to talk to you about a program that's really designed for teachers. It's from from grades 4 to 8. And it's really a key in hand program. It was designed by two educators from Toronto. And we'd like to show you how easy it is to get to those programs. So you have a link to our the websites, but Ari will show you how easy and simple it is.
So if you click that nedic.ca/beyond images link, you'll end up on this tab here, and this is the English version of the curriculum, and I'll show you the French one in a second. You can kind of see, like how Josée said, a turnkey curriculum, possible with the generous support of partners like Dove and TELUS for Au-delà de l'image. And so really when you go to access curriculum, you can see a bunch of resources here, tip sheets on how to potentially use the curriculum. They're really geared for teachers, but I think we've both had many encounters where just youth-facing folks have been able to reach out. So whether you're a healthcare professional working with youth, or coaches, guide leaders, mentors, etc. You can really tailor this accordingly, but we kind of geared it to teachers. And when you hit access curriculum, and let's say you're accessing it for a grade 5 student, you'll see a Google form here to fill out, some really basic information, where you're coming from and your organization, how many students will use it, so you can keep track of that and look at their grade level. And when you hit submit, and this is what you'll see on the French version for Au-delà de l'image, you'll see the files to go in and download. And Josée and I have some examples that Josée will start with that will walk you through, and will show you the lesson plans that you can see to hopefully see how easy it is to potentially use it, because it's absolutely free. And we think it's more important than ever that we focus on it. So we'll go back to our slides. And Josée, if you're okay going through the first one.
Yeah. So our first example is the grade 8 lesson 4 plan, which is about bringing about changes and questioning beauty ideals. So in this particular one, students will become instigators of a positive body image, and they will encourage this in their communities. So when we say communities, it could be in their own families, their own environments, and at large. So it's one example. You will see that depending on the grade and depending on the lesson plan, the themes will change slightly. And all the lesson plans or includes guides, so teachers' guides, some videos, activity guides for students, and finally evaluation forms. And we've linked in one example of a video that you could download just if you'd like, just to see an example of the video that would be shown in your classroom. And obviously it was done by teachers, so there's always a link with your school's curriculums depending on where you are in Canada. So mostly communication skills or health related. So this is actually lets you see a little bit how the program is set, and as you notice, everything is well organized. It's really a good program because there's 5 per grade. You could do this for a week if you'd like. This could be interesting. So have a 1 week in your year spend on topics of body image, self-esteem, etc.
And like Josée said, it really breaks down the curriculum outcomes. This is your lesson outline. How you can adapt and apply what you're learning to have different conversations with the students. And Josée mentioned assessment tools, so they're linked there for you, and some worksheets if you're having the opportunity to have either worksheets to print out or use them as tools for discussion. They're all kind of here included for you to use, meant to be easy. And so pretty tables and stuff like that too. And like Josée mentioned, this lesson in particular in grade 8, really focusing on building on that critical thinking skills to help them take action together. And so it gives some examples that you can now use in your school or youth environment. So that's one. Another one that I'll show, and this time I'll show the French for Au-delà de l'image, the French lesson outline for you all to see. This is grade 6, lesson 4. And so this is focused on how do we analyze advertisements that are around? And I think especially during the COVID-19 period, when people have been on their screens more and more, and maybe being more exposed to advertisements in different ways, or we're at the start of the pandemic, it was like, what was it called? The COVID-19 or whatever, like people were worried about the weight gain from COVID-19, and like people were making fun of it that way. The way in which our advertisements were also poking fun at people around weight is something that might be really important for people to notice. So in this lesson, students will have the activity to explore, or opportunity, sorry, to explore the different techniques used by directors and advertisers to manipulate images in order to sell a product, and really try to analyze that accordingly. Just like the other lesson Josée showed, there's a YouTube video if you feel like you want to show a video, and the link to where it is in the curriculum. So communication skills for most, but health also for others. Here's an example when you download the lesson plan, so that you can see in French, Au-delà de l'image. Josée can help me if I get any of the language wrong here, but it sounds like these are the web links and the videos that you can have pulled up to show people. These are the curriculum expectations that you can see depending on the province. This is how you can build your lesson outline and how you apply that lesson and reflect on it. Evaluation tools, and you can see some links here to help with that, including some other free resources. And so I think, Josée, we had people in the live recording also ask how, what do we do with older students? What do we do with high school students? And here you can see in the curriculum, in some places we've linked for things outside the curriculum for you to potentially adapt, but we've certainly heard of times where people have taken some of the lessons for grade 7s and 8 and had those same conversations in a deeper way with the older audiences.
Yeah, I agree. And also for younger, I also had a teacher who asked, what about younger students? And there are some lesson plans that could, especially on body image or self-esteem, that could be adapted also to a younger public. So feel free to, look over maybe grade 5 and see how you can adapt to your students' needs and level. Our third example is really on body image. So it's about sharing our messages on body image and self-esteem, but especially through writing. So what are the language that we use? What are the messages that we use? So students will be invited to write a letter designed to various industries in the beauty sectors, such as fashion magazines, people in publicity, producers, plastic surgery, just to expand a little bit about how what it is exactly that the languages that can be broadcast and that we can hear, and what are the messages that we'd like to hear, more constructive messages or use of language that could benefit more people, no matter what their body is, their body type or whatnot. And again, as you see, there's videos, there's different links to your school's curriculum, depending on where you come from. So again, if you have a look, you'll see that all this very similar to what you've seen before, with a much closer view at what you can see for grade 5, for example. Okay, so they ask really to, in this example, to write messages on how you would like the language to be used by a specific type of industry, someone in the beauty industry. So what would you say if you were the director or whatnot?
I'm really thankful to have Josée here being able to live navigate that bilingualness of it. And so we're showing you the first example, we showed you the English lesson plans. The second and third example, we showed you the French lesson plans. It's the reason why NEDIC and ANEB love to work together, is that we were able to provide this in both of those languages. So beyond images for English and Au-delà for French, and really navigate that depending on the context that you're in. So know that the content there has been reviewed and created by Canadian educators, and are able to hopefully be able to apply and modify and take as you need to change it for your context. But you have a lot of the material here already to be able to know that you don't have to necessarily go and do your fulsome kind of research or prep that you might have had to do that would have taken very long, because we know how busy you all are now, especially more than ever.
So when you're planning, let's say you are interested in getting these programs and setting them for your classroom, it might be interesting to maybe look at sometimes during the year, for example, the National Eating Disorder Awareness Week in February, where you could really have a week of the different programs, so you can address issues that are related to body image, self-image, self-esteem, all that. It might be interesting.
That's an awesome idea. So I think we're transitioning now our presentation into ways in which we can respond when we're worried about a student. And I think, Josée, you're starting us off on role modeling some of these initial conversations with people.
So ANEB and the NEDIC would help you if ever you are in a situation where you'd like to help someone, but these recommendations you can use quite easily. So you have to choose an environment where you and the person will feel comfortable. So obviously not in a busy space. Perhaps during the day, to choose a moment during the day where both of you are at ease, you're not feeling stressed. Is it in the morning? Is it later during the day? Is it at you at your own convenience? Start with maybe I statements instead of saying you're worrying me. Say I am worried about you. I am concerned. I've witnessed this and that. I am worried about you because you've become more isolated. I've noticed. So when you do this, it becomes even less. It's like you're choosing to talk about how you feel. It will be less confrontational than saying you're worrying me. Okay, the person might feel a little bit not as comfortable talking easily to you. And it's important to focus on the emotions and not what you're seeing. So maybe not the weight loss or the weight gain, not the way the person is eating, because under that lies really what's important. So how is that person feeling? So you can discuss feelings of anxiety, fear, sadness, for example, and also make them know that you're concerned, so you're there to help. And if need be, you can encourage a third party to come in and help that person. So it might be ANEB and NEDIC for the first people who are specialists who are knowledgeable about eating disorders, and then we can have a discussion about what are the next steps.
I'm going to click the link that Josée put in here just so you all can see, because I know that slide was in English. In French,
So,
and NEB has some wonderful resources that are here if you want to talk through that, Josée.
yeah, sure. And it's pretty much so the slide that you just saw, these are things that we also encourage. So again, exprimez vos sentiments, so express your feelings. Try not to bring the discussion at the table, for example. um, and again, make sure that the person is secure, in the sense that if you are concerned about their health, well, maybe it would be important to help them perhaps make a call to a specialist, a health professional, to avoid any complications with the eating disorder. So our website, so obviously it's ANEB Quebec, so it's mostly French, but we do have a translation. So you can, if you're more Anglophone, you can come on our website and just choose the option English. And we can, on our helpline, we're mostly Francophone, but we are all bilingual, so we can help you.
On NEDIC's website, we are only Anglophone, but you can see similar kinds of tips under our Learn section, under General Information or Resources, or under Get Help. We have a specific page for help for youth and some tips and things for people to potentially know. And so you have a couple of resources here and supports embedded within that if you need help, as Josée is saying, with that initial conversation, we're happy to help support you in that way.
So talking specifically about exercise and eating, now it could be a little bit delicate subject when you're dealing with eating disorders. But the whole point is to encourage, as we say in French, de bonnes habitudes de vie, so healthy living habits. And what is that? Well, what kind of movement makes you feel good? So we're not talking about doing exercise to burn calories. We're really talking about what is it for you that makes you want to do these movements or these activities, physical activities, because we know that there are good things about doing exercise. Not taking to the extent where it becomes a sickness, but obviously it's good to move. Um, and so, is it yoga? Is it walking? Is it, playing soccer? It could be anything really. But just taking a moment to really focus on what it is that makes you feel good. And then about eating, Ari will focus on that a little bit more later on, but just in general, we really encourage a balanced way of eating. So not categorizing certain foods, for example, but I'll let Ari talk more about that.
Mhm. That image on the right is actually from the new Canada's food guidance. So for those of you watching who grew up just like how I did with the Canada's food guide, that was very portion size focused. And you kind of saw that rainbow with the meals and the different amounts of each food group to take. The new Canada's food guide has really changed to instead encourage this plate model of eating, really making sure that adequacy is important for those of us. And we had some folks from the first session who um, work in communities where there is food insecurity, where people might not have an adequate amount of food that's there. And it's really, really hard to have a balanced relationship with food if you're not getting enough of it. And especially for our young people who are meant to be growing and burning lots of energy, they really need that fuel for their body. So adequacy is really important. Then having a variety on your plate and a balance that includes carbs and fats and sugars when we often as adults see so much messaging around cutting different foods out or foods being bad or foods being good. That categorization, like Josée said, is something we try to steer clear of and instead encourage this like flexibility that they can go to a restaurant or go hang out with friends and see a bunch of different things that they can try. Because it's okay, humans are wired to get pleasure from food. It's not a bad thing if you're eating seconds or thirds of your favorite meal or on your birthday that you really want an extra slice of cake or whatever it might be. Um, when we worry is when you're eating a lot in a small period of time and you're out of control. And that out of control piece, you feeling out of control yourself, not other people telling you that, is the piece that's really important. But pleasurable eating or eating sometimes as a means of like a way to cope with an emotion. As long as you have other emotional coping strategies, I think it's something all of us do. So really making sure that we're being mindful of our own biases on what healthy eating is really, really important. And that gets us to talking about food, some recommendations that we have. So I've talked about some of these already, but really trying not to label that food as good or bad or justify those choices, and instead uncouple food and appearance. Talk about food as food, like a grape is grape and a popcorn is popcorn. Not that one is better than the other, and that reflect on all the values that food brings into our lives. So eating this reminds me of this positive memory. Like I know for me, when I eat a crepe, I remember the time when I was in France and in Grenoble and was able to have a really tasty crepe. Like that's a really positive memory that food brought to me, because in that way we aren't like cars. Food isn't just nourishment and value for your life. That's really, really important. It's just also all of these other things because we're not robots, we're humans. When it comes to bodies, there are some pieces that Josée talked about in initial conversations that are here too. And one thing that I like to highlight is when you hear students or young people say things like, I feel so fat today, to try to counter your urge to respond with, you're not fat, you're beautiful. Because what that actually sends is a message that fat is bad. And we have many, many folks with who live in bigger bodies who also deserve to enjoy their body and can be healthy in that body size. And we have this the fat phobia that can exist in our society, really saying that there are certain negative values held for people in bigger bodies just because of their weight. Instead, with people, if you feel like you're hearing that a lot, help them identify what emotions are actually coming up. Is it that they're feeling sad, or is it that they're feeling rejected or embarrassed or disappointed? And say things like, I'm sorry you're feeling that way. What can we do to take the focus off your body? Or tell me more about what's going on about that emotion, what's coming up for you. You don't want to, and that includes with your colleagues around in the lunchroom or in the hallway, not engage in fat talk about yourself or judge your body, because our young people are absolutely watching us. It's not to say that we can't have bad body image days, and I think we can role model what those bad body image days look like. Like, I need some rest, or I'm not feeling so great about myself. But when you can and you're speaking outwardly to your students, role modeling that positive self-talk if you can, talking about how they look happy and confident instead of about their weight, or making sure you're commenting their bravery or their courage or their intelligence, their non-body related compliments. And so finally, we're at the place in our presentation where we can explain to you some resources. And I feel like we've shown you the websites already, but just to say that NEDIC has a national English speaking toll-free telephone helpline and an online chat service. You can see our hours for chat and phone here in Eastern Standard Time. And you can access all of that at nedic.ca. We're really passionate about spreading the message that eating disorders are as diverse as the people that they affect, and knowing that many, 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 many people are impacted by it. We also have other free resources for educators like ANEB. We hope to build capacity for educators, coaches, other youth-facing staff to focus on practical strategies for talking about food, weight, and shape in the classroom, or ways that you can embed other conversations into your existing curriculum. So if you try Beyond Images or Au-delà de l'image and you're having trouble figuring out fits, connect with us and we're happy to talk to you about that. And like Josée said earlier, share some strategies around supporting students coming forward with concerns. You're allowed to reach out to our helpline yourself to say, hey, we're worried about something. Are there resources for this? Or where's the nearest hospital program? Or I'm trying to find a therapist, or whatever it might be. We really like to take a whole school approach in our K-12 settings. So making sure we're talking with administration and teachers and support staff, talking to students, not about eating disorders, but about those risk factors and that we mentioned at the start of the presentation around body image and self-esteem, and having a parent evening. And we've been doing that virtually through things like Zoom or Google Meet for those at home, being able to make sure that people at home are also on board with similar messaging, because that can be really tough. And so you can always learn more at that link below, nedic.ca/presentation-outreach.
So ANEB, what we have, like the NEDIC, free or low cost, and I'll get into which services you would have a small fee to pay. So for all age groups, the help and reference line, which is open every day from 8 to 3 a.m. We have two websites, one that is more focused for adults and one that is more for youth. So ANEBado or anebquebec.com. They are bilingual. So if you are from Quebec, you're an Anglophone, you can access those services. A texting, a chat service, one of these are available every day. It just depends on what time of day, and on weekends it's only the chat service. For people ages 7 and over, we have open and closed support groups. These are for people who suffer from eating disorder, but also their loved ones. We also have group chats and a help forum. Also, we have training for health professionals who'd like more information about eating disorders. It could be yourself as a teacher. And then on our second slide, I'll just go to the conferences that we offer in schools. We offer two types of conferences for schools and one that is more for adults. So one that is based more on understanding the body standards of the moment and having a critical eye on what you're seeing in the media, and one that focuses on self-esteem and body image. Also, just to note, if you are a francophone living in Canada, you can access our services. Yes, it is Quebec. We offer services especially for the province, but know that if you're a francophone outside of Quebec, you can join us. If you'd rather speak in your mother tongue, then we're quite open to that. We even have people from France who join us because we are French speaking. So feel free to contact us if you need to.
Do you want to just mention for the audience what if anything is at cost? Because we saw the low cost bit.
So we are support groups, not the open ones, but the closed support groups, because it's a lengthy a support group. So most it ranges depending on which one. We have about 6 types, but they range from 8 weeks to maybe 15 weeks. And yes, there is a fee. So you'd have to go under our website, under services, the closed support groups, to see exactly the amount. But it's because you're always with the same person. You have activities, exercises to do at home beyond the 3 hours a week with your counselors.
Oh, thank you. And these services, especially the telephone line and the chat and texting services for both NEDIC and ANEB are anonymous and confidential. And so people don't need to disclose a diagnosis. We have many people who don't have the clinical eating disorder, but do reach out. And so please feel free to make sure you do that. We've been doing this work for decades now and consider ourselves hopefully reputable sources of this information, which we think is really important when almost everyone has an opinion on food, weight, and shape. We also put together this resource list of services across Canada and Quebec, Josée.
Yeah, I think as you notice, most of these are French and English. Most offer a helpline, a texting, and a chat service. So depending on what your needs are, if it's more for mood disorders, if it's any subject, for example, the kids' help phone in French, Jeunesse j'écoute, these are all good references. If you're a parent, if you look under resources in Quebec, Fondation Tel Jeune would be a good example of how parents could connect to an organization and get a resource. If it's more mental health, or especially if you're concerned about suicide, in terms of if you're in Canada, throughout Canada, or in Quebec, there are also resources that are good for you to have. So we just like to remind you that there's a part 2 coming up in fall. So stay tuned if you want to save that date, and we'll come up with new topics for you and see how we are during this pandemic, and how we can help you as teachers with everything that comes with a crisis.
You can always reach out on either of our services to get access to Josée and I directly if you feel like you want access to our email, or want to get in touch and you have ideas for what this could be. The folks in the live audience were able to give us some ideas, and Josée and I are going to keep our eyes on the news and the resources and the back to school plans and all of that to make sure that we can make this October webinar something really practical and helpful for you. But if you have ideas, don't hesitate to get in touch with us through ANEB or NEDIC's websites. Our information is there. So thank you so much for your time and your, I was going to say participation, but I guess your viewing today. And I hope that you're able to go onto the websites that we've linked, try out Beyond Images or Au-delà de l'image to really see if it fits your context in the one you're working with, because we're really I think more than ever committed to eating disorder prevention, and we're happy to have you on that journey with us. So thank you for your time.
Merci, Harry. Merci à vous.
Thank you.